Okay, well, it's my great pleasure to introduce my good friend Howard Switzer, who I first met at an AMI conference quite a few years ago now, because Stephen Zalenga has been mentioned yesterday, had done a lot of many years of outreach with people in the green movement, and was the Missouri people, Ben Calcis and Dee Berry, that got the ball rolling with that getting picked up. That's what Sue mentioned in yesterday's presentation. And so we were asking who's the person in the Green Party that is involved with money and banking, and we offered a scholarship, basically a free entry to the conference. And Howard was sort of nominated to come up, and he's sort of really picked things up since then. And we were discussing for last year's conference about how doing a presentation on some alternative monetary ideas, and one being Silvia Gastel, who was, I think he was actually originally from Argentina, and but he had quite a big influence about 100 years ago or more now. And he also had a big influence in Germany. His ideas were picked up in Germany quite a lot. And another person who's involved with AMI, Norman Ehrenreich, he first got into monetary reform through the Gesell movement. There's still quite a big movement in Germany, although it is mainly a lot of older people these days. You know, some of these things are dying out a bit, but there is, it was put into application and with a couple of local currencies in some towns in Germany and Austria. And I've actually visited the place in Wörgl, which is the best known place. And you can do, there's got a museum there and a walking tour, and you can walk around and see some of the things that were built with the local currency that it's called demurrage currency, where you have to reduce the you have to basically pay to keep it alive. And the idea is it becomes like a hot potato, and people want to move, spend it before they have to pay like a tax to keep it current. And so it regenerated a lot of economic activity in the town. So I'm looking forward to Howard's giving a presentation on this. So please give a warm welcome to Howard. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, too.
Pleasure to be here. And do I have, can I share my screen? And I'll get started with my presentation. I think it's so appropriate that Silvia Gastel is the last one in our program, because he touches on just about everything that we have been talking about. And which I thought was pretty amazing. As a lot of people think that Silvia Gastel, that it was about local currency and things like that, but his ideas were actually world encompassing and huge thinking. And he was actually born in Germany, but in his 20s, he went to Argentina. And during the Depression of 1890, began studying money because he felt like money was responsible for that crash, and the inequity and poverty and wars. He was seeing money being a real problem in the world, the way it was. And so he proposed a form of market economy without capitalism that was based on competitive entrepreneurship. And so kind of like Joe's dad said, what do you get when you take capitalism away from our economy? You get free enterprise. And so it was free enterprise is what he was really talking about. And he was an advocate of public money. And his main proposals were free land and free money. So he had some of Henry George's ideas incorporated into his scheme as well. he had some, let's see, here's his book, The Natural Economic Order. Now, in referring to nature here, the natural, what he meant was human nature. Because the economy is a human construct, you know, and so the natural economic order would be humans naturally doing what they should do in an economy. And he felt like there was a huge distortion of human nature because of the monetary system and because of the land ownership customs that that had come down to us. And so he felt like we needed to change all of that because he felt like he was big on human rights, right? And so he believed everybody not only had a right to air and water, but and food, but also to land, and felt like everyone had a right to land. And so that's what free land was about. It was about, like Henry George, putting the land in public trust and then leasing that out to the producers. And it was mainly the farmers. And he was saying that mainly the farmers is what that whole thing is about, getting the farmers back on the land. Small families would have small family farms, large families, large family farms. He also, you know, wanted different groups like, you know, anarchists and the communists and the social democrats and the religious groups to be able to have their own farms as well. Regarding free land, which I thought Tom and Randy and Joe might be interested in, he said the entire wage scale of the highest salaries is based on, or up to the highest salaries, is based on the labor proceeds of the cultivators of free land. So he was very big into setting prices via the raw materials that the farmers produced with their labor. So I thought that was pretty prescient. He understood that early on. Like the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, Gesell recognized that money's contradictory dual role as a medium of exchange for facilitating economic activity on the one hand, and as an instrument of power capable of dominating the market on the other hand. And so the starting point for Gesell's investigations was the following question: how can money's characteristics as an usurious instrument of power be overcome without eliminating its positive qualities as a neutral medium of exchange? He attributed his this marketing dominating power to two fundamental characteristics of conventional money. First, money as a medium of demand is capable of being hoarded, in contrast to human labor or goods and services on the supply side of the economic equation. It can be temporarily withheld from the market for speculative purposes without exposing its holder to significant losses. Second, money enjoys the advantage of superior liquidity to goods and services. So these two characteristics of money gives its holders a privileged position over the suppliers of goods and services. And this is especially true for those who hold and control large amounts of money, because the hoarders can disrupt the dynamic flow of money balances of economic activity, of purchases and sales, and savings and investment. This power to disrupt enables the holders of money to demand the payment of interest as a reward for refraining from speculative hoarding. And this allows money to circulate in the economy. So this intrinsic power of money is not dependent on its actual hoarding, but rather on the potential to disrupt economic activity. And this enables money to extract a tribute in the form of interest. And that is in return for allowing the metabolic exchange of goods and services in the social organism. The return on capital is accorded priority over broader economic considerations, and production becomes attuned more to the monetary interest rate than the real needs of humans. Long-term positive interest rates disturb the balance of profit and loss necessary for the decentralized operation of markets. I want to move on to a little bit here. And here's his book. There was 5 parts. And the first part was distribution. And he talked a lot about these guys in there, Karl Marx and Joseph Proudhon. And he was contrasting their ideas and pointing out that Proudhon was right and Marx was wrong, because Marx's ideas put that the problem was the owners of the means of production, right? And Proudhon said, no, it was the economic mechanism that was the issue. And so he hadn't quite figured it out, but as Gesell liked to point out, he was very close to having figured it out while Marx was still lost in that department about money. So in the 5 sections, the distribution, there's free land, money as it is, and that's the biggest section in the book, is money as it is, as we have this big complex system that is out there, and it's been that way for quite a while. So it took quite a while to explain money as it is, right? And then there's free money, or money as it should be. And so free money, free land, that was his main thing. And then he also had the free money theory of interest, which I have not gotten into myself yet. But he was also into free trade and free love. Now, before you react to those 2 ideas, we should really investigate what he means by those 2 ideas. Because I think it's real important, because like I said, he was really big into justice and saving the land and saving the people and, fixing things. He was disturbed by the injustice in the world. Let me see if there's some more I wanted to read here to you. Gesell, it says, Gesell argued that so long as land remains a tradable commodity and an object of speculative profit, organic connection of human beings with the earth is severed. And I think, our Tom and Randy, kind of, and Joe have all kind of pointed to that. Like the single tax reformers of Henry George School, Gesell held that the rental revenue from the land would enable the state to finance itself without the necessity of further taxes. But in attempting to trace the rightful owners of these rental revenues in accordance with the principle of causality, Gesell concluded that the amount of rental revenue depends on the population density. And this in turn depends on the willingness of women to bear and raise children. For this reason, Gesell proposed to distribute the revenues of the land rent in the form of monthly payments to compensate mothers for their work in rearing children. The maternal subsidy would vary in proportion to the number of their children according to the age of majority. He advocated the extension of this scheme to include mothers of children born out of wedlock and foreign mothers living in Germany as well. His intention was that all mothers should be released from economic dependence upon working farmers, and that the relationship between the sexes ought to be based on love, a love freed from the considerations of power and economic dependency. This guy was an old hippie, man. And that's right. And that's what he means by free love. You need to free it up from the economic oppression that women suffer under today and have ever since tribal ways were given up. Gesell also drew up proposals, and by the way, he distanced himself from racist ideologies too. He wanted everybody happy. He also drew up proposals for an international post-capitalist monetary order, advocating an open world market without capitalist monopolies, customs frontiers, trade protectionism, and colonial conquest, in contrast to subsequently established institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and the European Union, which act on behalf of the powerful within the existing framework of unjust structures. Gesell called for the establishment of an international valuta association, which would, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but that's valuta association, which would issue and manage a neutral international monetary unit, freely convertible into the national currency units of the member states, but operating in such a way that equitable international economic relations could be established on the basis of global free trade. Now, although the precise degree of influence cannot be established, it is interesting to note that echoes of Gesell's ideas concerning the International Valuta Association can be found in John Maynard Keynes' original proposals for the International Clearing Union, submitted on behalf of the British delegation, but rejected by their American counterparts at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. Well, this is one of his main, it's kind of the central theme of his idea about money. Only that money that goes out of date like a newspaper, rots like potatoes, rusts like iron, evaporates like ether, is capable of standing the test as an instrument for the exchange of potatoes, newspapers, iron, and ether. For such money is not preferred to the goods, either by the purchaser or the seller. They then part with their goods for money only because they need the money as a means of exchange, not because they expect an advantage from the possession of the money. So we must make money worse as a commodity if we wish to make it better as a medium of exchange. Now, John Maynard Keynes, in chapter 23 of the General Theory, dedicated 5 pages to Gesell's ideas. And he had said that he believed that the future will learn more from the spirit of Gesell than from that of Marx. I don't know that he read his book or not. He may have. Here's another guy. He says, free money may turn out to be the best regulator of the velocity of circulation of money, which is the most confusing element in the stabilization of the price level. Applied correctly, it could in fact haul us out of this crisis. Remember, they were in the Great Depression. In a few weeks, I am the humble servant of the merchant Gesell. Now, did he read his book? I don't know. He may have, but I doubt that was the reason why he said that. And that's the same way with this guy. You know, the reason why they said that was because of what happened in World Austria, when his ideas were applied and actually utilized and showed exactly what they did. Like Jamie told me early on, in fact, at the first day of my conference that I came to, I had the audacity, because Stephen asked me to sit in the final panel, you know, where you kind of critique everybody. And I sat down and I says, well, I'm looking at this book here, this Lost Science of Money. I'm saying, well, where's the science? And Jamie says, the history is the science. And he is so right. The history is the science of monetary systems, because it takes a while to figure out what happened when you make a change. So in Worgel, Austria, let's take a tour of Worgel, Austria in 1932. Now it was a population of 4,500. There was 1,500 unemployed. There were 200 homeless, penniless families. The factories were closed. There was no money. They were in a mess. This guy was a train engineer earlier on, but he had been reading the Natural Order natural economic order of Gesell as he was chugging down the railroad tracks, right? Reading his book. And so he went to the city fathers and he said, hey, look, our town's in a mess. I think this could fix it. You know, all we got to do, how much is in the till? And they said, well, we got 40,000 shillings. He says, okay, let's issue 4,000 Wurgel units worth of Wurgel units. And if it doesn't work, if it doesn't circulate, they can cash it in for that money. We'll just hold that in reserve and we'll issue this as the money and pay our public employees with it and allow people to pay their taxes with it. And so they set about that thing happening. And what happened? I could read there was many people that went there. Fisher sent a envoy there to study Wurgel. The French finance minister came there and gave a report, which actually I have here somewhere I could read. But basically, this is what they found. In the town of Wurgel, again, a population of 4,500, they had full employment. This is the middle of the Depression, remember? In 1933, public projects were all fully funded. They had new street paving, new street lights, extended the water system throughout the town, had a soup kitchen feeding 220 people every day, had reopened the factory, built 200 homes for those homeless people, built a new bridge, a ski jump, a new reservoir. They started replanting the forests because they started thinking about the future. And people paid their taxes in advance because they saw it coming right back into public projects. Things were circulating very fast. And that's what that demurrage currency of 1% per week did. It made it circulate very fast. So every Wednesday, that money had to get another sticker put on it to be full value. And all the stores and the post office and churches, everybody had those stamps that had been purchased by those organizations to stamp the money. And it circulated very fast. So they did $2.5 million worth of public projects in 15 months, issuing only 6,000 exchange units. They were called labor certificates. They had issued 4,000 at first, and then soon, a couple of months into it, they issued another 2,000 worth. So a total of 6,000 worth of the units, and did $2.5 million worth of public projects in 15 months. So that got everybody's attention. So things were much brighter in 1933 in Wurgel, right? So the new bridge, new homes were being built. And the miracle of the Wurgel was getting out all over. The headline of this newspaper, right? Money revolution in Wurgel. Thousands of cities all across Germany and Austria and other places in Europe and all over the United States saw that and immediately started issuing local currency, local scrip, but they didn't know what they were doing. So none of them worked right. None of them worked like the way Wurgel did, except the ones who were close to Wurgel and knew how it worked. And so there were a few other cities that began doing it in Austria. And that's when the central government stepped in and said, whoa, wait a minute. The central bank didn't like this. We're shutting it down. So they didn't like prosperity for the people. People got pretty mad about that and elected Hitler. So, because the same thing was going on in Germany, and people were in dire straits and needed to get out of it. So that's very interesting. Now I wanted to come back to the point where they started thinking about the future, because if we think about today, that's where we need to be going. We need to be thinking about the future of our planet, the future of our lives, of our children and grandchildren. Are they going to have a planet to live on? Because we're making an awful mess here. Well, it turns out that that demurrage currency had been done before. Now, of course, this is an example of Tenino, Washington. So they started issuing money. It was actually wooden money, but it didn't have a demurrage fee. And other cities, they did have a demurrage fee on it, but they would do it at every transaction instead of just once a week. So that really impacted on that currency and made it not work right. And so that was a problem. Today, Tenino's issuing wooden money again, by the way, just because of the scarcity of cash in their town. But Irving Fisher wrote a book on it to explain to the communities in the United States how you do it right. So that, because he felt like it could pull us out of the Depression in weeks, and made that proposal to Congress, and it was ignored and rejected. But he wrote the book Stamp Script, which is available online, is where I found it. And just Irving Fisher, Stamp Script. And this is the book where, and he gives some history of it and all of that. And then in chapter 6, you can see a stamp script manual for localities. And that was what his effort to try and get the cities to do it right, so that they would have great success like Wurgel did. Well, it turns out Bernard Latour wrote a lot about this, and he had been researching history and discovered that the High Middle Ages were similarly prosperous because they had a demurraged currency, a currency that lost its value over the year and then was replenished and then lost its value over the year. And so this was the period, it was a 250-year period when this was going on in Europe. And that was the period when the cathedrals were built. That was the period when the first universities were established. That was a period when mathematics and art and culture were just booming, that women even had more rights during that period. They grew bigger because they had such prosperity. Everybody was eating more calories than what the average do today. The masons working on the cathedrals would hire people to read to them while they were working. You know, it was a prosperous time. And when that money system was stopped, that's when it crashed Europe into a depression that was so deep and so bad that it caused the plague eventually, because people lived in such squalor. And while during that 250-year period of from about 1000 to 1250, the population of Europe doubled during this prosperous period, but the plague took them back down. It took half the population away. And there was also another precedent earlier on, as Latour pointed out, and that was in Egypt. Now, Egypt had I wanted to point out, these cathedrals were built by little villages. You know, they would seat, 300, 400 people, built by a village of 100 people, right? Or maybe 200 people. But they, and took quite a long time to build those things, but they were investments in the future because they saw that as a way to draw pilgrims who would come through their town, spend money, and move on. And that way they were assuring prosperity for their future, for the children of their offspring. And similarly in Egypt, they were thinking of the future too. That's what all those pyramids and all that stuff was about. And they had kind of a demurrage currency too, because the system that was operating then and this was before gold started being used, the farmers would bring their harvest to the granary, and they would be issued a chip of pottery, and it would have the date and the amount of the wheat that was turned into the granary there. Well, then these things would circulate as money throughout the year, but they gradually lose value because you're paying for storage and you're paying for what the rats eat and what rots. So there was a demurraged currency there, and that created a 2,000-year successful economy. Now, what is it that causes people to start thinking about the future when you have a demurraged currency? It's called the dynamics of net present value. It's a mathematical equation. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but the dynamics of net present value are affected by how the money, the interest rate of the money issued. And so I want to, there's a visual example here of what I mean. This is our zero. Okay, so in 10 years, pine trees are worth 100, and 100 years, oak trees worth 1,000. At a positive interest rate of 5%, you see what happens with the net present value is that those pine trees are worth less than $100, and in 100 years, that oak tree is worth much less than $1,000. But in a negative interest rate, in 10 years, those pine trees are worth $167, and in 100 years, that oak tree is worth way more than just $1,000, $168,000 counted on that kind of a currency. So basically, that is the subconscious psychological impact on people, which made them start thinking about the future, because they didn't have all of this math. They just had this effect on them that is subconscious. There's a whole body of research in that area. Economics without input from psychology is similar to doing mechanics while ignoring the law of physics, is what an economist, Wesley Clare Mitchell, said. And there has been quite a lot of research. I suggest people Google that, psychological consequences of money. And just remember that it's talking about debt money. It's talking about really the effects of usury on a society. Together, together, those research found that the results of these studies demonstrate that mere exposure of money can trigger unethical intentions and behavior, and is a barrier to social intimacy. Okay, there are a lot of studies that are showing all of this kind of stuff. And then I came across this quote from Margaret Thatcher. "Economics is the method. The object is to change the heart and soul." I'm thinking, wow, do these masters of the money know that? You mean they got something deeper going on? That kind of makes you worry a little bit. And so that why, and really why it makes it so important, because when we're talking about money, we're talking about governance. There's no way to talk about money seriously without talking about governance, because that's what it is. And it's, as Bernard Lataire said, it's the most influential of all human-made systems. Thank you. And did I do my 30 minutes? Am I over or under? I forgot to set my timer.
It worked out fine, Howard.
You did great.
All right. I have to say, I didn't expect so much big stuff when I got into this, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm really like to see some some of you folks also take a look at that, because that is some powerful big thinking going on in there. Seemed to me.
You know, from human rights to Austria to Argentina, Gesell was a powerful influence, and I'm glad Fisher took the time to investigate and
Exactly.
you brought a lot of new information to light, Howard, and so it may well deserve another look or two or three.
It's starting to get some more ground in Europe, I understand, because there's more and more papers coming out talking about Gesell, and also demurrage being mentioned.
If this video is helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe for new video notifications. Please consider donating at monetary.org/donate. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter at AMI Monetary or on our website